All right, now we need to take some time to consider the kinds of houses there are. Now, when we're looking at houses, we want to look at the angles. We want to look at trines. We want to also take into consideration Dusthana or Upachaya houses and Maraka houses. Now, angular houses, these are the houses 1, 4, 7, and 10. So the first house is the ascendant. The 7th house deals with the furthest away from us, because it's as far away from the ascendant as you can get. The 10th house is our career, our status, our power, our activity, our action in the world. Our 4th house is our foundation. So what we see is that the angular houses, they show who we are, they show the people in our lives, they show the activity that we take in the world, and they show our foundation in the world. So who we are is the first house, or how we project ourselves, how people see us. The activity we take is the 10th house. Those people in our lives, in general, the 7th house. And the 4th house is our home and our foundation. Planets in the 10th house are very powerful to influence the rest of the chart. We need to remember that any planet in the 10th house has the capacity to dominate the chart. This is why sometimes you can look at someone's chart and they'll say, well, I'm a Cancer ascendant. Why am I so fiery and why do I have such strong emotions? Well, Cancers themselves can be very emotional, but let's pretend we now have Mars in the 10th. Well, now we have this 10th energy dominating the rest of the chart, because that's the kind of activity that they're going to take. And if Mars is in the 10th, well, by its 4th aspect, it's going to hit the 1st, which is the sense of personality, and any planets aspecting that 1st will impact the personality. So the angular houses, 1, 4, 7, and 10, these are our foundations of power. And I've read and I've had people tell me before that if there aren't any planets in any of the angles, well then, this is kind of an old way of looking at it, but they would say, well, don't even bother to read this person's chart because they're not going to amount to anything in the world. And I haven't found that to be 100% true. But what I have found is that when there are no planets in angles, the person doesn't really take too much action. So they're not really as motivated, or they don't have the planets within certain fields to support them to go in a particular direction. And this can be applied to the Vargas as well. If we have a lot of planets in the angles of a Varga, 3 or more planets in the angles of a Varga, well, that's an important Varga. That's going to be an active Varga, because those angles have the energy or the consciousness of the planets to take action. So if you want to use an interesting snapshot technique, well, get out your Vargas, all 16 Vargas, and see where do you have the most planets in angles in the Varga, and that'll show you what area of life might be more active for you. So figure out what the Vargas represent, see what planets have the most, see what Vargas have the most planets in angles, and in that Varga, you'll be able to do more, or there will be more activity in that area of life. That's one way you can look at it. Trinal houses. Well, trinal houses are 1, 5, and 9. They're also called trikona houses. And they represent the areas of good fortune and grace. So whereas planets in the 10th house, that's our activity, which is where we're going to do stuff. The 1st, 5th, and 9th, these are more planets of grace. So planets placed here will give their results with more grace and ease. And if you see anyone who's got a lot of planets in the 5th and 9th house, it's almost as if things just work out effortlessly for them. They don't have to work so hard. And you get planets in the angles, 1, 4, 7, and 10, well, that might make a person who gets a lot of things, but they work very hard for it. And this goes in regards to the malefics and benefics as well. When we have a lot of malefics in angles, the person does have to work hard to get success. If we have a lot of benefics in angles, well, depending on the relationship to the ascendant, we always have to remember that, and we'll get to that in a future video, future talk. If there are benefics, things just work out naturally, and that can be good and that can be bad, because with malefics in angles, when things go wrong, the person who's got a malefic can muscle through and make it to the other end and still be successful. Oftentimes when we have a lot of benefics in angles and no malefics, well, the person doesn't have the grit, or the person doesn't have the fortitude to make it through difficulties, and so they buckle easier. Now, with benefics and angles, especially if they're in good shape in relation to the ascendant, the person probably won't have a lot of difficulties. But when those difficulties do arise, as they do arise for all of us, benefics typically make a person think that it should just work out without them doing anything. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but you do want to have some good malefics in your chart, so when the going gets tough, you can deal with it and you can move through instead of throwing up your hands and giving up to fate. So it's said that the angular houses are the divine masculine energy, or Vishnu houses, while the trinal houses represent the feminine energy, the Lakshmi houses. So the first house is classified as both an angular and a trinal house, and it tends to blend both the masculine and the feminine together, so it's a more balanced house. And this is one of the reasons why the first house and the planet that rules the first house is considered so important, because they bring strength and balance to the areas that they go to, again, depending on other factors such as Lajtari Avashtas against them, or their dignity, and so on. So, Dusthana houses, typically said to be 6th, 8th, and 12th. They relate to negative energies, or things we don't necessarily want in life. Now, we need the good and the bad, we need decay along with growth, so it depends on your viewpoint. The 6th house deals with disease and competitors, which we've seen when we went over the 6th house video. The 8th house deals with death and transformation. The 12th house can deal with loss and expenses and liberation. And in Sanskrit, again, these are Dusthana houses, or trick houses, which indicate sorrow or suffering. And we always have to remember that all this is relative. If you have a very spiritually oriented person who wants to transcend karma, this is why a lot of these houses, when they get in combination with each other, are said to be good, because they give the capacity to transcend worldly things. So it depends on your viewpoint. If you're very materialistically minded and all you're concerned about is having children, having a good career, and that's it, and you don't look beyond that, because all that's going to go away at some point in time anyway, then these 6th, 8th, and 12th houses are going to be problematic for you. But if you are okay with embracing transformation, realizing that the world is full of loss, it just happens all the time, and that disease and decay is part of the natural order of things for new growth to occur, you'll be okay, and that helps to elevate you to higher states of consciousness. We also need to remember that most of the time there are more malefics than there are benefics. We have Mars, Saturn, Rahu, Ketu, 4 malefics. Then we have Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, 3 benefics. And Mercury can act like a malefic if he's with a malefic. The moon can act like a malefic if it's waning. The sun's considered a malefic. So we see that in general there's more malefic energy within life. And this is one of the things that is interesting for me when I do astrology sessions, because everyone's looking for happiness. And I've gotten to the point now where I really feel that we need to be very honest about this, and that the search for happiness is not really what it's all about, because that's going to come and it's going to go. And it's hard to accept in the world, but unhappiness is more common than happiness if you're realistic and you look around. And my other question is, who told you you should be happy? Who told you that? You need to think about all the people who have lived and died, the billions, probably trillions of people who have lived and died, and their happiness is neither here nor there. Where is it? So we're not trying to be morose about this, but we need to remember that this is Vedic astrology. And the purpose of Vedic things is self-knowledge, and making peace with what is, making peace with what we are. And if we really want liberation, if we really want spiritual understanding, well, we aren't just going to get it by the good things. We're going to get it by transcending, going beyond the good and the bad, and seeing what is the support for those things. And that's accomplished by yogic meditation. That's accomplished by detachment. That's accomplished by dealing with aversions and attractions, again, attachment. So don't run away from these 6th, 8th, and 12th house things. One woman's chart I did recently, she had a beautiful chart, nice looking Jupiter, nice looking moon in her 10th house. But what was she going through but a 6th house period, which is a house of burning off karmic debts, working hard. It was also having a 12th house influence, which was more behind the scenes, feeling like one is getting run down and burnt out, running out of energy. So by dasha, she was in the cycle where what she was meant to be doing was exhausting that karma. Once she gets out of it, good thing is that the sun dasha isn't that long. But once she gets out of it, then she's going to activate these more supportive energies. But as with all things, it's going to rise and it's going to fall. So by being in that time, by being in the suffering, by being in the fact that she doesn't enjoy what she's doing and embracing it as an aspect of the divine consciousness, clearing out and expressing itself, if she embraces that, then she burns out that karma, which means when she gets to the next cycle, she won't have any leftovers to carry over with her. So we need to remember that all these houses, angulars, trinal houses, Dusthana houses, they all have a purpose, and they're all important within our life in the bigger picture, the broader scheme of things. And the good news is once you make peace with these ups and these downs and these negatives and these positives and the fact that that's the way it is, you actually do find lasting happiness. But it's not the kind of happiness that's dependent on things. It's not the kind of happiness that's like an emotional high. It's a hard to explain abiding peace, which is what we're all attaining to anyway. We just get it confused with these transient things. So anyway, don't discount the 6th, 8th, and 12th house. Find out what they can mean positively. What needs to be embraced by them? What needs to be let go of? What needs to be overcome? What are you being called to do when these difficulties, these obstacles arise? Sometimes it's fight. Sometimes it's to work hard. Sometimes it's to surrender. It just depends on multiple areas, multiple aspects of the chart. Now the 3rd and the 11th house. The 3rd and the 11th house are considered to be growing houses. Actually, there's a lot of growing houses. The 3rd, the 6th, the 10th, and the 11th house are considered to be growing houses or Upachaya houses. And these are things that you grow into gradually over time. Meaning that if you have trouble in the 11th house, well, the 11th house deals with doing what needs to be done, jumping through those hoops to attain something great. So you grow into that over time. You don't just start there, usually. The 3rd house is the house of our courage and developing our courage. Some people are born with that, but most of the time to develop it in a wise fashion with wisdom, it comes over time. 6th house are our debts, the things we have to pay off to our enemies. And what are our enemies? Just our competitors that want the same thing we do. So with 6th house being an Upachaya house, when it comes to a 6th house time period, you're paying off your debt. That karmic debt is being burnt. You can try to escape it. You can do things to mitigate it. You can do things even in advance to deal with it. If you know something's coming up, find out what the planet is influencing the 6th house, causing the problem, and then do remedies for it and really mean it. Really cause yourself some sort of hardship or suffering or austerity in that regard. And that helps to burn it out before you actually get there. So what we have to remember with astrology is that it's not about just saying, here you go, tough, deal with it. It's about saying, if you need to consciously suffer, make yourself consciously suffer now, or be of service consciously now, so that you can burn out this karma before it gets there. Because when it comes to you in an unconscious fashion, who knows what's going to happen? Well, the astrologer, hopefully. But usually it's better if you're consciously engaged in the process versus being treated badly without you having any say in it, which is why things like fasting, which is a hardship, or giving away your money to other people who need it, it's a hardship on you because you have to manage your resources better to take care of yourself as well as someone else. But all these are things that you can consciously do to improve situations. And that is also why being charitable, seeing the good in others, even though you get mistreated, seeing the good in others, that alters your karma, because then you are consciously not thinking about yourself anymore. or at least your little individualized self, and you're thinking about the other, so you're not so self-absorbed. So these Upachaya houses, they're things that you grow into. The 10th house is our career and our status. Well, unless we have a famous parent or something of that nature, which just makes us well-known. Usually status and career is something we have to develop, we have to earn, which is why in the 10th divisional chart, the chart that deals with our status and our ability to impact the world, Saturn and Sun are so important. The Sun deals with status, but Saturn, if it's in good shape, shows are we able to stick to it, to go through all the difficulty, to go through all the hardship, to finally become great. Because great things don't come unless you're willing to ignore the people who are constantly criticizing you, or unless you're willing to make sacrifices of your time or things that you want to do or people you want to see so that you can focus on this great thing. That's why yogis, good astrologers, good musicians, good athletes, they don't have the kind of lives, the lackadaisical lives a lot of people have, because they're focused. They're paying attention to what's important to them. For the yogis, God and consciousness. For the astrologers, understanding how all of this works and how to be of service to the clients or the people that come to them. The musician, they're sacrificing their friendships, they're sacrificing their days off to improve their skills so that they can bring more harmony into the world. Athletes, more discipline so that they can train their bodies. So we need to remember this. 3rd, 6th, 10th, and 11th houses, they're growing houses, and in time, improvement occurs as we get more wisdom. And as we get more wisdom, we understand what does it really take to make these houses work. So that's why they're problematic, especially if you go into a 3rd, 6th, 10th, or 11th house period early on in life. It might not work out so well because you haven't grown into it yet. So one of the rules with dashas is 3rd, 6th, 10th, and 11th houses do very well when you've gotten some miles under your belt, when you've gotten more experience. So when the time comes, you know what to do with the planetary influences, versus when you're young and naive and you think things should just work out. But again, there are multiple things we have to understand when we're considering this, but this should serve as a good general framework. Now, Maraka houses, this is called a killer house. And we think about it, the 2nd house deals with resources, the 2nd house deals with wealth, the 7th house deals with intercourse, or connecting with others, or finding oneself through others. And again, this being a Vedic science, liberation, self-knowledge is really an ideal to strive to as a yogic science. So putting too much emphasis on resources, putting too much emphasis on wealth, putting too much emphasis on having intercourse with someone else, or defining yourself through something outside of you, well, it's going to cause problems for you in the bigger scheme of things. But on a more practical level, sometimes when the 2nd house lord or 7th house lord gets in a difficult situation or is influencing an important part of your life, it can cause sudden breaks or lack of longevity, or too much responsibility. So it kills the thing that it's influencing. Now this needs to be ascertained from a variety of other factors. So we're not just going to say the 2nd and the 7th kills things. We're going to say that if you're looking at someone's chart and you see a negative 8th lord impacting the father, if you see a negative 6th lord impacting the father, if you see the 2nd lord impacting the father, well, these are all negative impacts. So when the dasha comes around, that Maraka idea adds to it so that you're more certain that you can say, this is going to be a difficult time for your father. So remember, with reading charts, we always need to look at it in layers. So we need to have one layer. Let's see, okay, I see that layer. Here's a possibility. Now we add another layer. Okay, I don't see that from this layer, so we're still iffy. Add another layer. Well, now I see it again. Add another layer. I see it again. So there are 3 indications pointing to this one experience, 3 out of 4, which makes me, usually when I'm doing someone's chart, say this is a distinct possibility for you, the trend's going in this direction. If I see an indication from one layer but not from the other 3, I'll say it's a very weak possibility. So the situation would have to be pretty strong in order for me to say that you need to be careful here, because all the way that we assess a chart and the way that we understand how things are going to give their fruits is when we see multiple confluence, multiple things coming together to give the result. Always remember that. It's just like anything else. You have to be in the right place at the right time, with the right people, doing the right thing. If you're only doing one of those, well, yeah, it's possible. But if you get all four of them, it's almost guaranteed that something's going to happen. And that's how we read a chart. So going along with this, that's why you don't want to just see one thing and latch onto it and say, my moon is in this position, so therefore it must mean this. Or my eighth lord is here, so it must mean that. Or I have this nakshatra, so it must mean that. That's one thing. Okay, it's important. You need to take note of it, but you need to see how it fits into the overall picture, the bigger scheme of things. So again, these are the angular, the trinal, the Dusthana houses, and the Upachaya houses. For these things in particular, we do go over them in the Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 1. So if you have that book, you might want to turn to that chapter, which I believe is the chapter on the houses. And if you don't have that book, it's available on Kindle. It's also available as a PDF download from my website, AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, and it's available on Amazon. So use these courses in conjunction with that book. These talks that we're doing, these 52 series talks that we're doing, it's all based off of the Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 1. So if you have that book and you follow along with these videos, you're going to get a pretty good introductory course in Vedic astrology and how to interpret a chart. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day, and it was good talking to you.